All right. Let's see how long this one takes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the 25 of you or so waiting for the live show to start. I do appreciate that. It looks like we're all good to go here. So that is good. Cool. All right. We're all rocking and rolling. So we're not nearly on a huge time crunch, at least with where this race is and with all the other sports going on. At least this one is kind of a solo today, at least at this time. Lock is in an hour and 21 minutes. Plenty of time to talk about stuff. Yet again, as I mentioned multiple times yesterday, our prices for what you get with TrueDFS, realistically, you're getting 3 sites for $320 a month. All the stuff we have at TrueDFS, and then you get all the pay dirt tools that James has worked on and made since we're now partnered with him on top of SaberSim. I mean, this is one of the best values in DFS. And I'm not just saying that to sell. Like statistically, this is literally. I mean, SaberSim is like, you know, we're 23. I believe with tax is $23 more expensive than just SaberSim. So you can basically get 3 sites for the price of one if you want to go with us. As we look at this race here, and we look at the practice speeds from these drivers, we're only looking at, I believe I set it for, actually, let me go ahead and check, just to make sure for the sake of talking where things are at as I let this load. Very, very unfortunate that yesterday was the first day that I was really like, yeah, let's sell this. Then I just got completely destroyed yesterday in the Trek Series race. So that's how that went. Okay, we're looking at laps over 112 average mile per hour. So any of the 110s aren't being used. Anything at 112 or above are being used. The first thing I want to look at, let's go ahead and get rid of that. First thing I want to look at is just the amount of speed that you see from obviously the faster cars and the slower guys. Now, obviously, you had, Creed, Larson, Austin Hill run super long compared to the rest of the field. But when we're looking at the speed that these guys are offering or that they're, carrying through their runs, I mean, you look at Justin Allgaier, you look at Larson, you look at Sanchez, you look at Gray. I mean, you look at these big teams here, and I mean, they are drastically faster than the field. When we're looking at a lap time that's around 15 seconds, like not only if you're slow, you're going to get lapped, but if you're in the back half of the field, like the leader's going to be on you very, very quickly and stuff. And so we have to at least we have to go about this race expecting at least the back half of the field to be 1 lap down, if not 2 laps down in this race. And that'll make talking about the value plays very interesting because they all look very, very similar today. And if anything, that's typically when I want to lean into guys who aren't going to be owned or who have what I would argue a higher upside. We'll talk about that when we get to the value plays in a second. Your fastest guys here, I mean, it's Allgaier, Sanchez, Gray, and Larson. When we're looking at where these guys are starting, I guess I don't even need lap 1 since I removed lap 1 across the board. When we're looking at where these guys are starting, obviously it's Larson on the pole with Allgaier starting 4th. You have Taylor Gray in 14th, and Sanchez is in 7th. Now, everybody kind of knows where I'm at Larson. And, I mean, I was on Larson yesterday, which seeing him at 28% ownership was pretty crazy. I thought he'd come in way, way higher on that. I think that's lowest we'll probably see Larson's ownership on any track for the remainder of this year. Obviously, starting first today with a very high expectation to lead a good portion of these laps. As we look through, and we won't look at everything here, but as you look at the Xfinity dashboard, a tool that you have access to, whether you have the NASCAR package or just any of the packages here at TrueDFS, and we go ahead and look at also the races that we're looking at for this data set are the Bristol races here. And so when we're looking at, and yet again, maybe you can't see that very well. Yet again, I'm on a gigantic TV. Maybe you want to go ahead and just purchase it. You can look at it yourself. I'm going to zoom in at least a bit for you so you can see here. But when we're looking at where these guys are in terms of your main lap leaders in these races and where they're starting, now we haven't had, somebody like Larson be on the lead or start on the pole, like to where he's just expected to kill the field. Um, some people. I was having a discussion with some of my friends yesterday in comparison to what the absolute boost being on their knees of like, oh, here comes Larson as he's in like 13th, in comparison to what Kyle Busch would do back when he was running the Xfinity series, and I feel like they focused way more on Larson than they ever did on Kyle Busch. Now Kyle Busch was waxing the field and leading all the time, but it's crazy that if you're playing Larson or have a bet on him or whatever, like he's the easiest driver to follow at any race because they just don't shut up about him. Um, but when we're looking at your laps led here in this 300 lap race, I mean, realistically, I think Larson has to be. I mean, really any of your favorite guys here, whether it be Larson, Allgaier, I would lean way more to Zilich over Quaffle. But you look at Larson, Zilich, and Allgaier as your favorites to lead laps in this race because obviously Allgaier and Larson were the fastest of these four drivers up with Nicholas and Sanchez qualifying towards the back of the field, and so like in situations at Bristol, if take 10, 15 minutes, 25 minutes to get up through the field, go from seventh to first, I mean, you've already given, away 100 laps left or whatever. And so with Allgaier and Larson, from a projection standpoint today, um, I would lean to one destroying the field probably more than the other ones. Because and obviously it's, typically we at least have different race titles, so it's a bit easier to see. But if you look at the years and you look at where these ranks are, um, like your main guy in any of these races are leading very much near 100 laps, if not more. And then either due to pit strategies and yet again, it's not just lap leaders. This is your Dom scores of where these guys end up being at. When we're looking at Allgaier and Larson today, I think whoever leads the most is going to end up in the probably 130 to 160 range. And then we get through pit strategies, we get through people staying out, we get through people trying to gain track position. There's a real chance that we're going to see probably your second or third lap leader, end up having anywhere from 25 to possibly like 45 laps led and stuff, and then it's just gonna come down to how quickly if Larson or Allgaier can get back to the lead. That's why like I kept Connor Zilich in the conversation right here because he would be a person that I would see potentially getting the lead by getting off strategy of whatever Larson and Allgaier are doing and stuff like that. I think for the most part, obviously yesterday half the field, I think it was 51% was on Corey Heim, 25 on Larson, Chandler Smith, who I just didn't even account for really. I think he was at 22%. You had Bailey Curry at 22. And so you had, and I mean that really sucks to the Bailey Curry guys because they got toasted on that one. But we're probably gonna have a situation very similar to that in terms of ownership, to where you have two big guys carrying, or I mean, I guess Larson didn't carry ownership, but your two, I guess, main guys carrying ownership, and then everybody else, in terms of from Pacific K range up, who could be a potential lap leader, probably anywhere from like 21 to 28% ownership. That's not counting the place differential that Creed and Hill will probably or have them bump ownership. I'm just meaning like, someone like Connor Zilich, somebody like Nicholas Sanchez, somebody like Sammy Smith, somebody like Jesse Love, somebody like Jones. These individuals who are going to be running the top 10 who can get the lead if the leaders pit and surrender the lead or whatever. Now, Bristol has been my worst track statistically. Like when I miss it, just like yesterday, right? So like I either like land on the lap leaders or I don't. I'm not going to kill myself trying to have enough ownership to make sure I get a situation where like Ryan Sieg or Sam Mayer takes the lead or whatever. I'm going to focus primarily on Larson um, running away with the field today, and if that happens, that's just the build that I'm probably going to be on, and if that doesn't work out, that's just where I'm going to end up being. Um, because of that, obviously we're at 14,000 yesterday. Now, due to the fact that, yesterday was 15, today he was 14, due to that, DraftKings has to price the rest of the field accordingly. So we have a lot of guys in the min salary range, and we also have a lot of viable people in the 5K range. And yet again, I'll answer any questions and stuff that you guys might have kind of when I'm done with my points here and stuff. But there's a real chance that like the real chalky builds, could, if you're chasing Larson, could potentially go either Larson and then place differential, and or Larson, somebody like Nicholas Sanchez, Ryan Sieg, and then Austin Hill, and then you're back in the value range. And so if we're working with like that type of build in mind, and yet again, in these shows, I talk about what I'm doing, right? Yet again, and a great thing about having a membership here is not only do you have my projections, you also have Sheets' projections. If you have any of the SaberSim packages, you also have SaberSim's projections as well. So we have multiple sources that you can use, whether you want to look at my stuff or see where I'm at or whatever, right? I think we're building with 5 spots. Like I think you play Larson and move on today. With that said, we're really, if we're building with Larson, right, or if you're looking at builds, and yet again, kind of similar to what I did yesterday in that live stream, I've shown you how I use SaberSim to go about this way. Obviously, I'm not going to do that in every race or every stream. Obviously, we're going behind the paywall as soon as the new website is up. So I'm not going to do that every time. But this is what I would focus on trying to do, or build wise. So you have Larson, right? We're then looking at a situation to where the 5K range, okay, realistically, and now Kyle Sieg at the starting 20th at 6K could potentially throw a wrench into that. But for the most part, we're looking at, Poole, we're looking at Perkins, you're looking at Mason Massey, Wright, Ellis, LeBay, and CJ. When we're looking at, and I'm just highlighting them so they're on your screen so we can see, we can visually just see where they are on the grid, right? When we look at, obviously, Poole chasing the dash for cash, I would imagine that gives a stupid high amount of upside of him potentially taking strategy to be up front towards the end of the race. With that said, that means by default he's going to be off strategy. And so, like, if you're playing, if you're playing the GPP today, I think Poole makes sense to have like probably 15% ownership if you're in a pool of 20 or whatever. Because they're probably going to be very aggressive, like in the situation where they can actually, stay in the lead lap, which I imagine Poole is not going to have an issue doing that. But the fact that he has a dash for cash incentive makes that makes him, or not makes him, but you need to account that in his projection. Like they're probably gonna be much more aggressive than usual. Same thing with Austin Hill and Creed, who I believe it's Austin Hill and Creed, who are the other two place differential plays, who are going to be chasing the dash for cash. Anyway, so you have Poole on an island, and then you have Perkins, Mason Massey, Chris Wright, Ellis, Alex LeBay, and CJ. Right now, what we can do, I think the best way to visualize of what these guys can do and what their upsides are, and yet again, if we're building with Larson, right, your two plays directly under him. At least when I visualize the lineup, it's the most expensive guy, wherever the other two expensive ones are, and then obviously we have the value ranges, which we're trying to figure out here, right? So this could be, we're just going to highlight this as green. This is the puzzle that we're trying to solve. The question is, do we need 2 of these guys or 3, depending on what you're doing here? If you're doing Larson and then another expensive guy, possibly. If you're playing Hill and Creed together, then obviously you're potentially double or triple punting, depending on how low you go down. But how do we really figure out who's the better plays between these guys in green? Well, the first step would be potentially looking at the practice speed. So where are all these guys at here, right? Obviously, you have Poole here. We have Perkins, who is 30th all around. And obviously, we're just looking at kind of where they're at here. Obviously, remember that the first row is not used, so it's this row -1. So Perkins is 30th on average, which, yet again, you can look at what his average is. You can also look at the amount of laps they're doing. Like that's, going to be important. Like if somebody's not running a lot of laps, that's probably not a good sign. So on and so forth. So this is where Perkins is at. This is where Mason Massey is at. This is where Chris Wright is at. This is where Ryan Ellis is at. This is where LeBay is at. Okay. This is where CJ is at. So outside of CJ being significantly slower, everybody from a practice situation looks the same. You go slightly higher than this in the 6K range, and we're looking at people like Alfredo. You're looking at people like Williams. You're looking at people like I just like the other one, Matt Benedetto. Okay, these are the drivers that we're building with. Like this is actually where the slate's going to be decided, right? They all look equally slow. Okay, the 6K range guys who are starting mainly in the 20s are averaging practice speeds in the high 20s. All the 5K guys are pretty much averaging speeds in the low 30s. Okay, so there's really no change between this value range. Okay, and yet again, this is why I'm harping on this so much because this is what's going to determine the slate, right? Like what value plays go, which one don't, who's carrying ownership, whatever. So they look very similar from a starting position. Obviously, these guys are right beside each other. They look nearly identical from a practice speed situation. Okay. So really nothing changing there. So the two factors that are determining kind of where we go here is the salary and potentially what they have done this year. Now we've only gone to one short track, and I'm not counting Phoenix for this. And the Martinsville race was a true, survival race. So yet again, another tool that we can use. This is potentially a way that you can use it. If we go ahead and look at um, Martinsville, which yet again you have access to doing this at any track in any series. Okay, yet again we're using this as an example of how to use it. We look at Martinsville race from a couple weeks ago. Okay, and then we look at running position of where these guys are running. Who potentially is a guy that we didn't think about, or how do these guys run, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so we can kind of go through and see where people go. Now I've already done this, so I kind of know the answers. But like this is how Joshua, and I guess I'm kind of bouncing back between the 5 and 6K range, but just looking at the 6K range very quickly because you have Benedetto starting 25th, Williams 26th, Poole 23rd, and then Anthony Alfredo 29th. So you can kind of throw those guys together. This is where Williams ran at Vegas, or not Vegas, at Martinsville. Yet again, we had just a huge wreck fest. But where were these guys in situations where the race went green, or how did they lean on the side of variance? Were they able to get through the craziness at the end? Like if everything's equal and you're going to have maybe slightly higher ownership on other people and it not be on, you're going to have a high ownership on some people and it's not going to be higher on other, like these are situations where you probably take the guy who's lowest owned if they have a very similar projection. So this is how Williams is. This is how Matt Benedetto did. Okay. Pretty much identical. Williams just survived the last yellow, right? And finished 17th, where De Benedetto basically had a pretty much identical race as him, and he finishes 26th, right? We look at Anthony Alfredo, who has ran into mechanical issues this season, and Bristol was a situation where that happened to where he DNF'd on lap 110. But you look at the trajectory of his race, and he was very much pretty much the same play as Josh Williams. If they were very close to one another, right? And so that makes a 6K range kind of look pretty ugly, right? Like we're just kind of playing whoever, or not whoever, but like that's going to be on your judgment or whatever projection source you're running with. Because if you do Larson, whoever your two expensive guys are, whether you're potentially chasing a guy who can get the lead at some point or paying up for place differential, that's your own prerogative. And then we have the value range and then the potential situation where you are kind of left with your last guy in as a 6K player, whatever, right? So like that's where the 6K guys are. And this is just looking at Martinsville, but it's showing that like this is where everybody is. So if we look at people who ran at Martinsville, kind of what they did as they started in the back. So we have Ryan Ellis, who started 24th, finishes 18th. Hey, made it through the field. Now, I'm not saying Martinsville and Bristol are the same, but it's noteworthy to at least be aware of where these value plays are running and what they're doing. Now, granted, he finished, you know, 18th at the end of the day. Where did he run? Basically outside of the top 30 all day, and then gain position late in variance. Otherwise, you can see that with the average running position, but I'd much rather visualize that than just see the number. Okay. We then have somebody like Mason Massey, which I don't believe Mason Massey ran at. Let me check really fast. I want to get the driver who was in that race. They may have missed the race at Martinsville, but let me see. Give me a second. Waiting for scoring here. Give me a second. We're loading. Who is in this 45 at this track? $74 and $66 DNF'd. 45 was Brad. So how did Perez do in this race? And very similar. Gains positions late due to the carnage. Now he did, they got off sequence and rode up front the entire day, but in terms of speed of where this is at, very, very similar to Ryan Ellis, which would lean very similar to where probably Mason Massey will end up running today. Where did the rest of this value range kind of go? Now, I don't know if Perkins ran either. I have to. Okay, so here's Perkins in the 31 car. Very similar. They stay out with, for whatever reason, this was just a yellow where these guys in the back of the field decided to stay out. And then they all finish very similar to one another yet again. And so, like, the reason why I'm going through this is because all these guys are very, very similar. Who's another guy that people hate playing, but basically had a really productive day at Martinsville? It's Chris Wright. Okay. Yet again, very similar. These all three of these guys stay out at this yellow. We have Perkins, Brad Perez, and Chris Wright. Obviously, Chris drops through the field, and then the other two kind of follow, and they all kind of finish very, very similar to the day, just based on where the carnage and everything happens here. So these guys were all very similar in terms of potential upside and really what their race did in this race. I don't believe LeBay ran, but I'll take a quick gander really fast. I don't think. Yeah, LeBay didn't run in this race. That was Snyder. So we'll kind of use Snyder as an example of where kind of Snyder was. And yet again, I mean, obviously we have a lot of guys on the screen here, but we're seeing that these guys, when they start in the back of the field, they are pretty similar to one another. What did I get DM'd here? Who is DMing me? What is going on here? Okay, I'll answer that question in a minute. So like all these guys are very, very similar, right? So then again, going back to the Bristol race today, if these guys are projected very similar, if they are starting very close together, what are avenues that we could potentially go use and, et cetera, et cetera. I have started using Chris Wright a lot this year because people have been very much, have not wanted to play him. He's 5,000. This is a race to where if we're paying 14 for Larson and Chris is 5, like that kind of makes sense. Similar upside to what Ellis and Mason Massey can do. We just have to hope they are on the right side of variance, right? CJ starting last at 51. There's probably at least going to be a few DNFs in this race. Realistically, CJ is probably going to, on speed alone, is probably going to be like the 35th guy. He's probably going to finish like 32nd. I don't know if that's going to be enough to help him with the price tag at 51, but if we're having to pay up for a lot of people, that is noteworthy. Who do I like from a probably raw speed of the value plays here of who I think was probably going to finish the best? Not if DFS wasn't in the cards and whatever. I mean, it's probably split between Mason Massey and Ryan Ellis. And then yet again, Poole, you're taking on a much higher risk because he's starting 23rd. He's probably going to finish 21st. Like that's probably what the real projection would be, especially when we look at Poole. Now, yet again, we'll go ahead and look at Poole here. Let's go and see what Poole did at Martinsville. Yet again, survives chaos and stuff too. Now he did start in the back of the field, but if you look at just kind of how pool runs at different tracks. We typically see them, finish right around 24th to 18th in these races with a running position of like 23rd or 22nd and stuff. So like this 5K range, like there's really nothing separating them other than salary. And so in a situation like this, what I would do is build with the people that you want to use specifically with Larson, who are also expensive, who are going to compete for a top 10 or top 15 finish. When we're looking at, kind of lastly here, now yet again, there's so much more on this dashboard that will help you build and look at stuff. But when we're looking at these scoring ranges, I mean, we're going to need when we're like at the end of the day, at the end of the slate, when we're looking at our top 4 drivers here, I mean, these are guys scoring nearly 60 points in these races. Now, yet again, a lot of it's coming from laps led because it's 300 laps. Like that is pretty significant for an Xfinity Series race. But even your values and the rest of the field that you're using or whatever, like we got to be scoring near 50 points. Okay, so if you're doing Larson, okay, whatever scores 100 or whatever, right? You play him potentially with Allgaier to potentially get your 2 main lap leaders and or Larson plus whatever other lap leader it is, whether you believe it's Allgaier, whether you believe it's Connor Zilisch, Sammy Smith, Sam Mayer, doesn't matter. It's just your potential 2 lap leaders or Larson and people who are going to finish top 5 who are starting the back of the field, like Creed, potentially Eckes, potentially Austin Hill, Jesse Love. Okay, and then yet again, we're in the 7 and 6K range here. To finish off your lineups and stuff. Or you do Larson and then slam, a ton of the 7 and 8K range, which I believe that type of build was what was success. Now, I didn't get to see how the end of the contest finished because obviously I had a terrible day, and then I kind of felt bad for all the people who had Bailey Curry because I know that it was like, you know, Chandler Smith, Bailey Curry lines who were killing the field. So I haven't looked back at the contest to see the exact build or kind of how the distribution of salary was used. But the third build that I would see you would be using today would be Larson, and then a build that's very heavy on 7 and 8K range drivers to where it's people like Tanner Gray, Ryan Sieg, Sammy Smith, and then potentially being able to get Austin Hill and stuff. But the main point of this video here is that the 5K range is pretty much projection wise, they're all the exact same place from a raw projection standpoint. Um, utilizing them much more in terms of what I need in salary. If you like, you know, Mason Massey and you can get to Mason Massey, I would use Mason Massey. If you don't have the salary left over for Mason Massey, I would have no issue using Chris Wright. I would not let these guys determine your lineup. I would build specifically what you want to do with Larson and where else you want to build, and just because everybody's projected similar, you just use whatever value plays you need to make whatever approach for the slate work for you. Let's see. I do appreciate you guys being here. Let me check out the chat. Also, I have a question. What is this? And then peek back or the individual who DM me on Discord just now. I'll answer and help you out as soon as the live stream is over. Let's see. Thank you for that. I'm glad that you guys feel like I'm teaching you, so that's always nice to see. I need to know who to fade in the top 20 outside of Larson. So this is the one where I would not fade Larson today. I think and I mean, dude, things go differently. I mean, Larson finished second yesterday. There's a real chance Larson could have won that race with like 2 laps led. Like it's crazy. Insane. Love or Hill today. I'm torn on them. I like Love for a better finish, but Hill has more of a safety. Yet again, when we look at, I will borrow Racing Reference for this really fast, just because this will be faster to answer this specific question. If we look at, I always forget. Should be this way. This should be the less than 1 mile. And if it's not, I'm going to cry. I don't think it is. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So when we look at what Austin Hill is doing, I mean, if we compare Austin Hill and Jesse Love between these two, which Love doesn't even have that many races. Or yeah, Jesse. No, good job, racing reference. That's really helpful. We can't even look at Jesse Love. When we look at Austin Hill, there's been numerous occasions now. Yet again, maybe you just want to look at Bristol, whatever the case may be. And just it just so happens the two Bristol races he started 26th and wrecked out, and then 17th and finished 14th. But there are other situations where he's finished or he started, very similar to where he's starting today, and has made it through the field. Uh, and then there's other situations where he started where he's finished today and he's finished like ninth and stuff. Um, from a if we're looking specifically at Austin Hill versus Jesse Love, yet again, first and foremost, I would default to whatever projection source you're using. I won't tell you which one mine's leaning to, but from potential upside today, seems like I have them both projected to finish right around 10th today. Due to that answer, it would probably be Austin Hill, being the better play, but I think Jesse Love has much higher upside to actually lead today. There's a real chance Austin Hill struggles in a sense of like he just gets like ninth, seventh, or whatever, and he just doesn't lead laps or get a lot of fast laps. Whereas Jesse Love has a much higher chance of getting the lead in this race. Now, yet again, we're going through a situation where Larson, Allgaier would need to have issues. Jesse Love would need to get off sequence or whatever. But between these two leading laps, I would probably lean it more towards Love and Austin Hill. From a safety perspective, it's probably Austin Hill over Jesse Love. Obviously, you choose whatever um, way you want to go there. Um, and then yet again, kind of counterbalancing what your lineup is doing. If you have I guess it's not even counterbalancing because like it'd be really difficult to like. I feel like if you're using Austin Hill, like he's like one of the more expensive guys you're paying up for. Like you have to build around him. Whereas, I mean, Jesse Love at 92, I guess the same thing. It's 200. Hmm. I would play Austin Hill over Love. That was a very long-winded way to get there, but that's where I would go. Hmm. Who'd have fade with playing Larson top 20? Oh, I mean, who'd have fade with? Oh, who'd have fade with playing Larson? Well, you know what you can do is if you have SaberSim through us or whatever optimizer you want to use, yet again, if you want to get SaberSim through us, which can not only help you with the contest sims and stuff, but can help, really determine where this is going. Obviously, this is the price and stuff. What I would do is yet again build your lineups and then pay attention to where expected ownership is coming on or where ownership is going towards people like with Larson. Like if you're building with Larson, right? If you have 1,000 2,000 lineups 3,000 lineups highlighted with just Larson, you can use that to quickly see what builds are being used with him in those remaining five positions. You can then see what the exposure rate in those lineups are for individual people. Okay, so that would probably indicate that they're either a good play or you need them due to pricing or whatever the case may be. And you can also, I think this is probably a race where you could determine duplication maybe fairly easy, or at least what combination of drivers are used in situations. Like if you're using Larson and Creed, for example, if you look for lineups that are using those two guys, you'll probably see very similar um, ownerships to, or not similar ownerships, but you'll be able to see very similar like construction lineups, like who kind of where they're going and stuff. Um, anyway, answering your question, like who to fade. Yet again, I'm kind of just walking through how you can determine that on your own. But who to fade, I would probably just. It's probably not one individual driver, but if it's lineups that are here, let me get mine actually, just so I can answer this easier. Easier. Hmm. Which well, shout out Sabersim. They don't even have stuff up yet, so that's helpful. I was gonna at least look at what they determined as chalk, because otherwise I'm just using my own exposure rates and stuff. Um, Based on my own exposure rates, it's really kind of spread out between people like Sawalish, Gray, Ryan Sieg, Nicholas Sanchez. Um, so you might not actually have to fade or be underweight on somebody, because it's looking like the builds are going Larson, at least for my stuff. Larson, Austin Hill, or Creed, and then potentially 7K guys, and then your value range, and then obviously that varies. If you're using more expensive guys, you're gonna be in the 5K more. If you're using more 7K guys, you're probably only using one 5K guy, whatever. But I don't think you need to really purposely be underweight on anybody, because I think naturally we're going to probably be spread out. Like outside of Larson and Allgaier and potentially Connor Zilic as your main lap leaders, very similar to what we've determined with the 5K range of being very similar. The 7K range is very similar as well, between Ryan Sieg, Sanchez, Harrison Burton, William Sawalish, stuff like that. These guys only need, around 36 to 39 points to hit value. If they're in a situation where they're doing that, they're probably close to potentially getting the lead on strategy. Um, so I would not be shocked to see a lot of the MMA guys end up having a lot of lineups that are probably Larson and then 8 and 7K guys heavy for the potential upside of getting additional lap leaders. It really doesn't answer your question there, but that's where I am. That's what I'm talking, or that's kind of where I'm at there. If you guys like this type of stuff, yet again, now I already do coaching and stuff. Like people will just ask me, and I'll spend, you know, time during the week going through and talking with them and stuff. But when if you have access to me, I'll answer any questions or go over any builds and stuff like this with you. Um, so I do believe that's mainly it. We got a Justin question here, which we will. I think we have to kind of take him at what his speed is. And yet again, I think there's a real chance that he kind of gets Justin as somebody who isn't in the field a lot, who I just have a feeling that Justin's going to get ran over. Not Allgaier, but JB. I just feel like he's going to get absolutely obliterated in this race. Absolutely no love given to him at all. He is 11th best on average. Yet again, if we're building with 7K guys in mind, you potentially go Kyle Larson. Actually, here we'll do it over here just so we can add everything up easily. I'm not saying this is the build I'd use, but I would not be shocked to see builds similar to this, right? Right here, you're at a 29-2 between three guys. You can pretty much go wherever you want here. And again, this is just kind of like Justin, Nicholas, or placeholders and stuff. But that keeps Justin alive, especially when he's competing directly against the other 7K guys, with people like Sieg, people like Parker Retzlaff, people like Harrison Burton. I think you have to have exposure to Justin just on that build, or that avenue to build alone. But I think he's going to be absolutely used up in this race. I do believe that's it. Thank you guys for being here. If you want to talk to me more, which I will get back to the individual who was DMing me on Discord during this live stream. Yeah, pass on. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Consider joining. Thank you. Bye-bye.